Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. We talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm Ernst Jeffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. This might be rest in peace time for the Pac-12 because things are getting worse and worse for the conference. It might be curtains because I just talked about in one of my recent videos that Oregon and Washington could go to the Big Ten. That is not finalized yet, but it is looking more and more likely that the Ducks and the Huskies will be joining the Big Ten Conference, even at a reduced rate in monetary value that they will be getting, because the $35 to $40 million which Oregon and Washington are rumored to be making in the Big Ten if they do join is far more than the under $20 to $25 million that they're currently making in the Pac-12. So it would make sense for Oregon and Washington to go to the Big Ten, even though I'm sure that the Ducks and Huskies want to make the exact amount of money as the other teams in the Big Ten, but the Big Ten doesn't really have to allow that because at this point the Big Ten has the leverage. They're in great shape right now because adding teams would only help the conference and not adding them won't really hurt because they're already in great shape. So it's really at this point, all of these teams that are not in the Big Ten or the SEC for that matter are really just in bad shape and they need to join these conferences or have the potential to be left behind altogether. I cannot stand the idea of these two super conferences, but that is where we are heading. But this is not what we are talking about right here with Oregon and Washington to the Big Ten. Now there are rumors that Utah, Arizona, and Arizona State are going to the Big 12, with the possibility that Arizona is the most likeliest of the three so far to be joining. Maybe even tomorrow that Arizona could be the 14th member of the Big 12. And this is just bad news all around for the Pac-12, because what if they lose all five of these teams? If they lose Arizona, Arizona State, and Utah to the Big 12, and Oregon and Washington to the Big 10, there will only be 4 schools left of the original Pac-12. Washington State, Oregon State, Stanford, and Cal. That is a meager offering of schools left. And what can the Pac-12 do? Can they possibly add schools from the Mountain West and be able to legitimately still call themselves a Power 5 conference? I just don't think that's the case. And I really don't even know if at this point it would even be worth the Pac-12 to try to add those schools to remain relevant. It would almost make more sense for the remaining Pac-12 schools to join the Mountain West, or really just for those remaining schools to join the Big 12. If the Big 12 would accept them, which I don't really think would be a bad idea for the Big 12 to accept those schools because they still are solid schools. And you don't want to leave Oregon State, Washington State, Cal, and Stanford to dry. But again, I do think that even though these are rumors, it does look like the Pac-12 is about gone because of the fact Arizona makes sense in the Big 12, because the fact that the conference is a great basketball conference. You have Kansas, you're now having Houston, and all these other schools are really solid. Baylor as well in basketball, and now you're going to be adding Arizona, which is one of the best remaining schools in the Pac-12 in basketball. I think that Arizona to the Big 12 makes a lot of sense, not just for basketball, even geography-wise, it's not too bad. And Arizona is not a school that the Big 10 or the SEC is necessarily going to covet, so it does make sense for them to go to the Big 12. Arizona State, they're going to follow Arizona to the Big 12 more than likely, you would think, because Arizona State probably need to stick together. They're very similar schools on the surface, and they've been together for so long, and there even has been rumors that they don't want to be separated, so Arizona State seems likely to the Big 12. Utah, you have the rivalry with BYU. BYU's going to the Big 12, so it makes sense for Utah to join as well. And all of these schools would help the Big 12 financially to make more money than the Pac-12 currently is, that still does not have a media rights deal. The Pac-12 unfortunately did this to himself. I don't want to dump on the Pac-12 because I really wish this was not happening to the conference. I really wish there was a way that they could have kept this all together. But they did not do a good job with their Pac-12 network, putting it on television. Now the fact that you don't even have a new media rights deal when the Big 12, the ACC, despite their media rights deal being awful, and the Big 10 and the SEC, which have loaded media rights deals, the Pac-12 doesn't have one. They can't get one because they're losing teams left and right. The Pac-12's been reduced to the Pac-9, and now it could be reduced to even fewer teams than this if they do lose these teams. Again, they have not lost them yet, but it is getting very close and likely that they will. And if they do, the Pac-12's gone forever, as we know it at least. Even if they do add the Mountain West schools, there's no way that we can legitimately ever look at the Pac-12 with the same viability as a Power 5 conference as it used to be, because these new schools that they could possibly add, like SMU, San Diego State, Boise State, UNLV, etc., they're not going to be able to make the Pac-12 viable as a Power 5 conference. It's really unfortunate. I hope the Pac-12 can stay together, but it is almost curtains, like I said before, for the conference, because Oregon and Washington, they do make sense in the Big Ten. You've added USC, UCLA, and Oregon and Washington are viable schools. You look at, like I said in my video talking about Florida State, Clemson, Oregon, and Washington possibly going to the Big Ten. In that video, all of those schools are some of the highest schools left of all the schools that are not in the Big Ten and the SEC currently. And you do know that the SEC and the Big Ten want to add these teams because it's going to make them even stronger conferences than they already are, which is making the two super conferences a more possible reality that a lot of people don't want, but it's more likely what people are going to get because the Big Ten and the SEC want to get bigger and be able to have themselves as the top conferences where no other conference can possibly pass them. And again, the Big Ten and the SEC have done a great job. They've watched these other conferences crumble. The ACC hasn't fallen apart yet. They haven't lost Florida State and Clemson to the Big Ten or even the SEC for that matter. So as long as they keep their schools together, maybe fix their media rights deal, maybe they can stay together, but once they lose a team or two to another conference, that conference could crumble. The Big 12 is just stockpiling teams, which I think is smart, even though none of these teams are as solid as the teams in the Big Ten and the SEC, and they're going to make nowhere near as much. At least the Big 12 is adding a lot of schools that are at least decent to solid university and programs that are going to help the conference make a decent amount of money. But the Pac-12, they're just losing schools left and right. They're getting picked apart. And again, none of these schools have left yet, but if Arizona is the first domino to fall to the Big 12, that reduces the Pac-12 to the Pac-8. Arizona State could follow, Utah could follow, and as the reasonings that I've already outlined earlier, it seems very possible. Oregon and Washington to the Big 10, academically it makes sense, financially it makes sense, geographically it even makes sense now with USC, UCLA already going to be in the conference. The Pac-12 could be reduced to the Pac-4, and at that point there's nothing they can do to save the conference. Even if they do have Mountain West teams, it just will not help them stay competitive in the Power 5 conference landscape. It's really sad what's happening to the Pac-12. Maybe if they can keep these teams, maybe if they can keep Arizona, which it could be even tomorrow that they do go to the Big 12, that could be a school that already that the Pac-12 is losing. But if they can keep these other schools, maybe there's still a shot the conference can be saved. But I'm finding it harder and harder to foresee that happening with everything that is going on. The only conference is getting destroyed right now is the Pac-12. Maybe the ACC and the Big 12 will be next if more of their teams get picked apart, especially the ACC, because they still have viable teams left like Clemson, Florida State, Miami, and North Carolina that the Big 10 or the SEC can want. The Big 12, I'm not sure if there's many teams that the SEC or Big 10 would want, but you never know at this point in time anymore what these conferences are going to do. The Big 12, though, needs to find a way to get as many teams as possible, maybe even add Gonzaga and UConn from the Big East and the West Coast Conference respectively to at least help the basketball side of the conference. But the Pac-12, this might be the last chance that they possibly have to save the conference, and if they lose these teams, I think that it is over for the conference. We can finally say that the Pac-12 is dead. There's nothing else that they can do to save the conference. It's really unfortunate. With the loss of the Pac-12, it will make it where the two super conferences is going to become more of a reality. The ACC and the Big 12 are going to have to do everything they possibly can to stay relevant and not lose more of their team, especially the ACC. But we haven't got to that point yet. Right now, there's still technically 5 Power 5 conferences, even though the Pac-12 is really weak right now. If Arizona is the first domino to fall to the Big 12, and if Arizona State and Utah follow them, and then if Oregon and Washington go to the Big 10, the Pac-12 will be dead as we know it. And it's really sad to see that we finally have come to a point where a Power 5 conference will no longer exist the way that we are currently used to seeing it. But it's going to be interesting to see in the coming days what happens to the Pac-12 and if they can find a way to somehow save the conference, if they can keep some of these teams. But it definitely is not looking good for the Pac-12. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Comment down below what you think about the Pac-12 possibly losing Arizona, Arizona State, and Utah, and Oregon and Washington as well. And if you think there is a shot at all that the Pac-12 can be saved, or if you think that the conference is going to be dead in the future and that there's nothing that they can do to save it, follow me on Twitter as well. Link is in the description, and I will see you next time.